Now, I'll just introduce you, Avril, and then I'll let you start speaking. So I've been into tarot for 50 years, and I found my first pack, which I've kept. I've had it for 50 years. And over the decades, I have personally remained interested in tarot because it's, what have I drawn? Oh, is that important? What am I doing?
Count your blessings, William.
Count my blessings, yes. I'm sitting calmly and being given a blessing. So I kind of ignored tarot over the last 20 years partly because the people I learned it with and the books I read, especially one by Muni Sadhu and one by Dion Fortune, were deep and ethical and interesting and genuinely supportive of spiritual development. And they had an understanding of the psychological dynamics that went with spiritual development, that go with spiritual development. And I kind of let it be that I still had my own pack. And then somehow or other I started reading Avril's blogs. And it's about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I almost immediately replied to the first one I read and said, hey, this is great, intelligent, wise, deep, insightful. Thank you so much. And I've carried on reading them. And for me, Avril, I'm about to give you a big stroke, so get ready to blush. For me, Avril is the most insightful, wisest, and compassionate interpreter of the tarot around at the moment that I know. But underneath that, that means that we have an insightful, compassionate, and insightful woman, because there's a person in there doing the interpretation. So in this conversation with Avril, I want to find out a little bit, first of all, about what kind of a woman, soul you are, like how you got into it in the first place. And then we'll start talking about the tarot in general. And then I'd love to dive into your mechanism for doing the interpretation. And that will be a much more subtle and inquiring conversation, I think. Don't know, we'll see. But in the first place, huge welcome to you. Thank you for being with us. You can say something now.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much, William, for inviting me to take part in this meeting. And it's lovely to see so many lovely faces. And I want to say thank you very much as well for understanding me and understanding, you know, my work, and which is a lifetime's work. And I'm very happy to be able to share that with you this evening. So thank you so much, William.
Right. So where are you from in the first place? Where were you born? You got a northern accent there? So?
I'm a northerner, yes. Although I've been down in the south since I came to London, actually. It must have been 79. But I'm from West Yorkshire. Okay. I tell people I'm from Huddersfield, but in actual fact, we moved around West Yorkshire because of my dad's job. But I lived in Huddersfield the longest, from being 11 to 17.
When you were a child, were you having an awareness of subtle dimensions and stuff, or did that come to you later?
No, I was that weird kid. I think you've probably heard this described before from so many people. I was highly perceptive. I could read people from being very young. But I think the problem was that I wasn't emotionally equipped to fully understand what that was. I just knew that I saw people differently and in greater detail from being quite small. And I think that kind of impacted on me growing up.
Were you having experiences other than this intuitive understanding of people? Were you having A spiritual thing going on as
Yeah,
well?
I was always aware that there was something other than this two-dimensional world going on. And I was a very solitary child. I'm the youngest of four. Um, and I'm the youngest by some years. So as my brother and my sisters left home, I kind of had to kind of entertain myself. And my parents were quite puritanical. My father was a high-ranking police officer, and my mum, she was very typical of that generation where she went to work to kind of help support, the family income. I've got to say, that there was a type of family that kind of upwardly mobile insofar as that we came from mining villages originally. And so my dad kind of decided he wasn't going to do the mines, he wasn't going to go on the railways like was expected of him. So he went into the police force and did quite well for himself. But the challenge there was that we had to kind of abide by his rules. And he was very much pro-establishment, pro-institution, as he would be. Which meant that we were never really encouraged to mix with other people. So it was, I kind of grew up being entertained by spirit, if you like. I think children have this wonderful way of being almost shamanic in their play. They bring everything to life. There is no such thing as an inanimate object. And so such it was for me. And certainly the early part of my childhood was quite idyllic because I had vast swathes of countryside to play in, and everything was alive with the spirit of being in the country, and the trees had their names and the animals had their names. And that kind of was a soul food for me, which became a resource later on in adult life.
Did that stay with you when you went through adolescence and did you become any kind of a teenage rebel?
I was awful. I was dreadful.
Yeah.
I think having
what was the most dreadful thing about you? Come on.
Oh, the most dreadful. Oh, I don't know if I could disclose that, William.
All right, let's moving swiftly on.
I was a typical teenager. I wanted to push boundaries because I think, I was always very creative. I was a very creative thinker. I was not very good academic, hopeless. I left school with 1 O-level. But I think certainly creatively, and when it comes to writing and working with concepts, I was quite competitive. But the environment that I grew up in was a typical working class secondary modern school in Huddersfield, and it just didn't have the parameters for me to work in. So I kind of lost my way a little bit as a teenager.
Sure.
But there was always this guiding light there.
Yeah, that's your job as a teenager. My story is very parallel. I lost.
Yeah, it was sex and drugs and rock and roll, really, in a nutshell. Good. Much to my father's chagrin.
But, of course. Did he throw you out? Did you walk out later on?
Well, I got married to leave home.
How old were you when you got married?
17.
17, okay.
But I have to say that, and I married a minor, and I have to say that looking back, he was a rescuer, and I think that's where I first learned what rescuing was all about, both the good bits and the bad bits about being rescued, because he kind of saved me from myself. Because throughout my life, I've gone through tracts of time where I've been quite lost. It's almost like echoes from that period of being unsupported, misunderstood. I mean, I remember being, 12, 13 years old and absolutely hating hypocrisy. I mean, I just couldn't, it was painful because I could see straight through it. And that's been a theme very much that's stayed with me through, my formative years.
Did you have children with your rescuing minor husband?
No, the marriage didn't last, predictably so.
Yeah.
He was very traditional, like, traditional Northern life. Like he was the major breadwinner going. And I've got to say, in the mid-70s, the mining culture was thriving. We got free coal every week, which was put on the path outside. We had to shovel it down into the coal cellar, and as they're washing dirty old boiler soups in ammonia and doing my bit, but it wasn't for me. And I remember sex and drugs and rock and roll revisited me, and I just had an epiphany moment, and I thought, I can't do this. This is not for me. I want to talk about God and play bass guitar. And I remember announcing that to my husband, who just didn't understand. And he was a very sweet person. He was a really good guy, and he was a pathway. It was a pathway for me to move out into the world and discover myself and to kind of reinvent my sense of institution.
Did you play bass guitar in a band?
I learned it, yes, but I didn't play in a band.
No. And if you had played in a band, which would have been the band to play in?
Oh gosh, do you know, I have such a massive eclectic musical taste. I love everybody from Bob Dylan and Van Morrison right through to even current rap and hip hop artists.
Okay. So I know you have children, and I know that you got your first tarot pack when you were 23.
I was 23, yes.
Which came first, your first child or the tarot pack?
The first child.
Okay. Were you in wedlock or not?
No, I was. So I left Yorkshire because at that time Thatcher's government was kind of cutting a swathe through the north, and there was just no jobs. So, and I'd kind of had to save my life. I was going through one of my lost periods again. So I actually went to work at Woodlands, of all places. But it was the best thing I could have done at 18, 19 years old, because it was a roof over my head.
Yeah.
It was money in my pocket, and it was an element of safety. I got away from things that were actually really quite toxic. Sure. And would have been my downfall. And I really did listen to that spirit voice within, which was saying, you know what, I thought, you've got to get out of this place. And I really built up. I detested the north. I thought, I'm never going back there. But it was on this particular part of the sojourn that I met then the next relationship in my life. And we lived quite nomadically. Again, we were into poetry and music. And again, I'd found a bit of a soulmate or a wound mate, one or the other. But we were very creative together. And we lived in Cornwall for a long time before we came to London. And I had my first daughter. But the relationship was not meant to last, because he became a Hare Krishna devotee, and he found it hard to balance the need for domestic life with his own spiritual path work, and he couldn't align the two. And I was kind of quite keen that our daughter have a grounding in life and that she go through the social mores. I didn't want to be overtly wild, which is, looking back, it's quite strange, because she did indeed become the wild child out of the 3 children that I have.
Is she the daughter that had some difficulties later on, so you needed to stay at home and make a living from home? Is it okay talking about this?
Yes, it's absolutely fine. Yes, I'm okay talking about it. So, yeah, so we separated when she was about 2, and we were quite close. Her name's Faith. Faith and I were quite close. And, there wasn't much money. Life was challenging. But, we got on and made the best of it. And we made a nice little home together and one thing and another. But I think, she's also a very creative, very speculative, very perceptive person. And sadly, she found drugs, but she found drugs with the wrong people. And she took too many one day, and she might as well have, put a shotgun to her head, really, because she went out one day as Faith and came back as somebody else entirely.
All right. So you got a difficult family. See, what I'm trying to get at here is my sense of there was something about you as a mother with a family on your own and things shifting. So you had to dig deep into the world of social care, support, independence, that whole...
Well, no, I did it myself.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I was completely... This is where I think having a spiritual life, a rich spiritual life, and being in touch with my own internal landscape has been so useful, is that it's helped me not just survive, but thrive under really, really challenging situations. And I think it's a drive through my work that things are survivable. We can get through the worst of times as long as we're prepared to be honest with our own spiritual voice, because it's a fantastic resource, because it's your friend in times of great darkness.
So give us a little picture of what was the worst possible times for you, if you can, just so I think we'll give people a deeper sense of the grounding and the depth from where you come with your work, actually.
I think having poverty was a big... I mean, there was literally no money. And being and eking out what you had.
So that's you on your own with
this one child, but then eventually I had two others.
So it's 3 children.
So it was 3 children, and there was no support. My father was the type of person that would say, "You've made your bed, you have to lie in it." So I did, and I thought, and I mean, there were times when I thought, I just can't keep doing this. I can't go on. But somehow you do, and it's because you kind of drill down into your spiritual intelligence, into your spiritual resources, and you just know that eventually it's going to come good. It's going to come right. I believe that not only did I have protection and guidance from my own spirit team, but my children had theirs too. So there was never any sense of us falling apart completely. It was just that we had to be wary of the world, really. That and to be mindful of how we trod along the ledge. So poverty was the biggest challenge, and then of course it was the environment that we lived, the type of people that inhabited that environment too. I mean, alcohol and drugs was never a million miles away, in the environment that we had.
What was the environment?
Well, we lived on council estates. There's nothing wrong with living on council estates, actually, I have to say very quickly, because some of the most spiritual things I've witnessed have happened amongst people who live cheek to jowl, in that kind of an environment. And, we have some very happy memories of, and then, of course, there would be people who, there was a whole period of squatting in my life as well.
With your 3 children?
No, with the first one.
Okay.
It was something that I didn't want to revisit with the two
No, sure.
that followed.
All right. So there's three
But I think
children. Sorry.
so 3 children. So I want to
Three-
say that
no.
where it dovetails is that when I got my first deck when I was 23, it was from someone who I had the 2 children with. So he had this deck lying around, and he said, "Oh, you'll probably really enjoy this." I thought, "Yeah, great, tarot deck," because I was a consumer of anything psychic, anything spiritual, anything that kind of fed the soul. I was hungry for. And anyway, so he had to leave because, again, he had alcohol problems, which resulted in us going into a refuge. So that was the next big challenge. So there was me and 3 children in a refuge. But that's where tarot came into its own, because I would never have thought at that time that the journey I was going to have with tarot is going to be so epic. But it's amazing, when you're throwing things into a bag that you're going to take with you. The tarot cards came with me. And it was absolutely at that point in the women's refuge that the journey with tarot truly began.
So for me, for example, I remember in my 20s periods where my best friends were the I Ching and the tarot. I felt as though they would always understand me. Was that the kind of relationship you were having with the tarot?
Absolutely. Yes, it was a best friend. It was someone to turn to. It was somebody. I learned very quickly that what tarot does is mirror you back to you. And tarot finds you. We don't find tarot. Tarot, in its own kind of magical way, will find its into your life if you're meant to have a journey with it, whether it's a very long, epic one like mine, or whether it's for short bursts. And it will always be of use and benefit to you. It's meant to work in your life. It's meant to be a dynamic in your life that kind of shows you what's going on an interior level. And what tarot did is it allowed me to make sense of who I was and why I felt so out of time and so out of place all the time.
All right, so let's start the metaphysical conversation, right? Because I'm unclear.
Okay.
In this area, I am unclear. And let me talk for about 2 or 3 minutes, so you know why I'm unclear, and that will allow you space to give us your insights about it all. So there are the major arcana, which is the 22 major symbols, each of which has an archetypal image that tells a story, gives a narrative about a certain set of circumstances and dynamics. And there are also the other cards in the pack. I lived in Morocco for a couple of years, and one of the places I lived close to was where they had the annual Moroccan Sorcerers Convention. It was in a little town at the beginning of a valley, which had 7 hills, a little chapel on top of each hill, and then this town called Imlil. And the annual Sorcerers Convention was there, and you go up this mile, up this to about 10,000 feet, to this walled town. And in the car park was actually where the donkeys were left before people went into the town for the annual Sorcerers Convention. When we went up there, there were about 100 women sitting cross-legged against the wall of this car park, donkey park. And all these women had 40-card packs and were doing readings. And there were no major arcana at all. So, there are all kinds of theories about where the 22 cards of the major arcana come from, and some kind of social, cultural histories of where the other cards come from. But I've always been bewildered about where they come from and how come they each of the cards speaks with this deep psychic metaphysical narrative that provides this extraordinary companionship and insight for us, And finishing the last 30 seconds now, I remember the one story that I heard that I always loved and hung on to, and I don't know whether it's true or not, that when initiates to the mysteries of Egypt were taken down into the underground temples beneath the pyramids, they had to go through a corridor in which the major arcana, 22 major arcana, were there on either side of the corridor as you walked in. And they were very, very ancient images. Whereas if you go to Wikipedia, for example, and look at the article, it's all kind of European card invention. So, Avril, where does it all come from?
Well, indeed. It's there are so many theories, aren't there? I'm interested because I also spent some time in Morocco, in Fez and Tangier. I didn't sadly go to the Sorcerers Festival, but I think the cards that you're referring to are the Naib cards, and it's very possible that they arrived in Cordoba around 1279 with
the Christian Kabbalistic Sufi meeting.
Yes, and it was a particular king. I'm trying to remember his name. I think it was.
Listen, whatever his name is, why do the images? How do they hold this narrative archetypal power, or whatever they're? Do you understand? This is the bit I'm trying to explore.
So I think so. The 20. If we're talking about the major arcana, the 22 are indeed archetypal, and the best description I've heard is from a Sufi master called Ibn Arab, who said that they come from the logos of the earth. So in other words, they were spawned from the imagination, the mundus imaginalis, the imagination of mankind in the physical plane. And each of these archetypes is a representation of every single human experience that a spirit goes through on their time in the material world. I mean, some postulate that the pictures were given to us by a deity or a higher being, but I think that what's happened is that they've kind of taken their form as we understand it today over a long period of time. And the symbols inherent in them, they connect us to the collective consciousness. And it's that collective consciousness that makes us interdependent. And we understand that because by all of us can understand what the meaning of the major arcana is. Somewhere inside ourselves, although we might have different life stories, we might have different approaches, each of us has a memory or an ability to relate to each other's story on a level, because the collective consciousness is made from the memory of many human lifetimes. The collective consciousness is a work in progress. It's constantly being built upon. And these archetypes, as mirrors to the soul, are the source of that. And contained within these symbols or rather the larger archetypal images are smaller symbols that we kind of just know that. So a long white beard, for example, we know means wisdom, because we presume an elderly person, they're bound to have some wisdom over, for their period on earth. For some reason, I'm looking here at the hermit in front of me as I'm talking to you, and in the hermit's lamp there is the six-pointed star, which represents the Merkaba. It's the chariot to God. So we know that then there's something going on internal with this hermit. There's something spiritual, a spiritual movement within the hermit's need to contemplate on the divine essence. And the light, we know a lantern, that lantern is for shedding light. And is lighting that way along the path. He's a guide in some shape or form. And so when we kind of sit with that image, we think, are we being guided or are we the guide?
Right,
so what the archetypes do, they encourage you to have an inner dialogue with your own spirit. I think that's what's so extraordinary, that you not only do you become interdependent with humanity, but you become interdependent with your own spirit.
So let's just pause there for a moment and go, there's a collective psyche, consciousness, unconscious, that belongs to humanity as a whole. Mm-hmm. And this is an energy field, a thought field that contains everything that human beings have expressed, emoted, felt, thought, and that floats as a kind of cloud of information.
Yes, I think that's quite a good description.
And somewhere along the line, some human creatives, perhaps with the help of muses, started to interpret collective behaviors into particular images.
Yes. So, with the original art forms, when man decided that he wanted to make sense of the chaos he was born into, art was born. So we kind of mirrored what we saw around us. We expressed our environment and our existence through art forms. And art forms help us to relate to our life because they're recognizable forms.
So when somebody connects with a card, there's the individual, there's the card, and then connected to the card and the image of the card is this archetypal energy form.
Yes.
Thing, difficult to get the right language.
I've got to say, it's our purpose in life to grow it, because the reason that we're born, the reason that we're here, is to grow the universe. It's to grow God. I have this idea, that God would, or whatever you want to call him, her, it, whatever, is an underdeveloped personality. It doesn't know.
Say that again. God
is an underdeveloped personality. It doesn't know of herself, itself, himself. So omnipotent and so omniscient. So it sends little shards of light, which is what we are, to mirror itself back to itself. And so the divine recognizes itself through the human experience, or the spirit having the human experience. And that's our purpose. That's ultimately our story.
So this is a very, very mystic language that you're using, which I adore. The fact that you're bringing it into the conversation.
My work is to encourage people to see that we're not purposeless. Tarot is really existential. It tries to encourage you to really see your life as purposeful. And the baseline is that your job is to grow God. Because as you make your way through life, God recognizes himself or herself, and immediately the universe is expanded.
I want to put that in another language, because I think I'm never very comfortable with the word God, goddess, right?
Yes, I know, I understand. I'm very cautious about using it, but it's universal.
Yeah. So there's this
Great spirit is better.
There's this mysterious field of consciousness. I mean, I've heard other mystics. This is how I like to understand it. So let me just put this into the conversation. There's this huge field of latent consciousness in realms beyond the understanding of the most obscure maths. And this huge realm of consciousness is expressing itself and learning about itself partly through us.
It's intelligence. Yeah. This world is intelligent. Yeah. Everything has intelligent communication.
But as we ourselves, as individual units, flames, sparks, become conscious of that, we're actually being part of this universal consciousness's endeavor to move itself forward, because, as you say, it's not yet fully developed.
Exactly, and nor will it be ever. It's infinity.
Yeah. That's very, very, very blasphemous for some people, isn't it? Because God is perfect. Goddess is perfect.
But it is perfect. But this is the point, William. This is perfection in motion. Yeah. You couldn't get anything more perfect. I mean, you can look at it from a point of view. The fool's knapsack. People say, what on earth could be in the fool's knapsack? So there are two things that we could look at. One is that it's a memory of all your past lives, which are erased when you come into conscious manifestation, because we have to live in the now. It's this life that counts, because this is the one that you're living. And we have to be aware of that so we can do this whole growing thing. But also within that knapsack are our tools. We are born with the tools that we need to cleave out our path for us.
Now, this is why I reckon you're the best contemporary interpreter of tarot, because what absolutely drives you is this deeper mysticism.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's what I call the psycho-spiritual perspective.
All right, so
for me, it's love. Love is all there is.
Okay, so let me pause. I'm going to shift the conversation a bit, because I think what we've done is make big exclamation mark. The context for the tarot is that it's a tool for this mystery that's the cosmos, whatever you call it, that is itself awakening and developing and emerging inside itself, and we are sparks of it. That's a mind blower for people who've not, heart blower for people who are not in that already. So when people have a reading with you or get your interpretations, that's one of the things that's happening. I want to move us on a bit from that. How come what has gone on in your life that you are also psychologically sussed, right? You're psycho-spiritually wise. So we've got the mystic bit here, that's framing it. But at the same time, there's part of your story we haven't heard yet, which is there's this bass playing creature who Hare Krishna boy, tarot boy, 3 girls. One of them is has problems, right? You're on the poverty line. You're living in coal-faced estates. Now, inside all of that, something is also happening where you wise up to the very grounded, earthy, psychological.
It might be my rising Capricorn sign.
No, don't give me. No. What actually? Yeah, great. So I hardly do astrology. Well, I do a bit, but no. What was that? Is your understanding about psychology? Do you have a training in it? Were you in therapy? Do you just read? Is it intuitive? I know it's partly intuitive.
So I've
what
always
feds
had
into it?
a fascination for comparative religion. So I've studied lots of things from Buddhism to Sufism. I have a great affection for Carl Jung. Um, and I mean, I rarely read novels. They're nearly, my books are nearly all about spiritual path working, because I literally go on that journey with the book into behind the high priestess veil, if you like. And I really, and particularly when I was younger, I really enjoyed understanding the dynamics of the awakening moment, how that we can come from, this very base level, and yet we can refine ourselves through understanding uh, how what our relationship is to our own spiritual nature. And I think, I was always have been very open to that. The unconscious fascinates me. I really believe that the unconscious knows everything. The unconscious is the real boss here. The unconscious shapes our lives. And once I started to realize that, in actual fact, that I was playing a role in what the unconscious wanted me to do, because I realized it was an unraveling of these tools and these skills. And then I began to associate and I could see the stages of development, and I associated with karma and understanding karma and cause and effect. And I began to see that actually it was far more profound than people talking about it in esoteric circles, that it could actually, you could live it on a daily basis. And I started a whole section of work called Kitchen Sink Spirituality, because, being spiritual was available to all of us. You didn't have to wear white, you didn't have to, you didn't have to be flawless. And, I found that that spiritual connection was strong when even when you were kind of looking after your family and doing all the domestic things. And, I had some great epiphany moments, doing the ironing, for example.
All right, so let me get really.
I don't know if I answered that your question or not, but
yeah, no, it's absolutely gets there. It's in the right, and
it has to be real. You see,
yeah.
Our spirituality has to be real. It's not just a talking point. I think for me, it's about owning your spiritual nature, because it's who you truly are.
So I've got my head at the moment, my head and heart, as the enabler of this conversation. There's a part of me going, I've got two questions. I know which direction to go. One question is, so what do you think of counseling and psychotherapy, right? And then the other question is, why do people self-sabotage so much on the path? So it's like, choose your question.
Okay, counseling and therapy, I think it's very useful. I think it's very relevant and very beneficial, because again, it mirrors back to us, almost like we're mirroring that underdeveloped personality back to himself, herself, itself. Therapy does the same thing, but in microcosm. So we get a better understanding of who we are and what our potential actually is. And I would say that my tarot reading is not fortune telling. I tell every single client that I am not a fortune teller. There are some very good ones out there, but I'm not one of them. But it's more an opportunity for you to dive into your own story and to get some clarity, and so tarot for me is therapeutic, because it's about self-discovery, because I think self-discovery is the real spiritual. You are the reason you're here. The only reason the world exists is because you're in it. And so it's about understanding that you're more potent than you give yourself credit for, because people do self-sabotage, because I think that, again, I tell students that here in the first world, we're very much needed. Because in the first world, we're taught to hate ourselves. We're taught self-loathing. We're taught to destroy anything that's really lovely.
Where we taught this?
I think we're taught this, you know, through our cultural conditioning. We're taught this through the, you know, the remnants of the, you know, educating for the Industrial Revolution. I think, you know, in the first world, people don't value themselves in a way that they could. It's not, they're not encouraged to have that vision and go for it. And so they ultimately sabotage their own power because people are not encouraged to sit in their own power. Not that I'm, you know, going in there as a complete revolutionary, but what I'd like to do is for people to recognize what their talents and their skills might be, and to see that they can cleave out a life that they love from using what's in their fool's knapsack.
Okay, I have to be very careful now not to move into a discussion of modernity and capitalism.
Well, it's there, William, and
Okay.
I don't like it either, and I'm very cautious with you too. But I do feel that modernity and capitalism has scripted a spirituality that we adhere to. It's, you know, there's no such thing as classless and free. We all set out on this liberation, or we think spiritually liberating path, thinking, yeah, you know, this is, I'm going to, you know, do this and I'm going to do that. But we still adhere to the institution. We're still answerable to our conditioning and even how we've learned our healing and our approach to healing. And that's one of the things that I address in my work with tarot, that it has to be about transformation and not maintenance. Because I think, sorry, go on.
No, I'm just, you and I could have a conversation now about being a class warrior.
Yes, absolutely. But I don't want to go, but I'm very wary of putting labels and things in boxes. But at the same time, you know, when you're sitting with someone, and for me, a reading is a bit like a prayer. That prayer is that you are sending a message to that divine essence, and that divine essence is often saying, you find your freedom, and that freedom is finding your place in the world. And it's very often beyond the cultural conditioning and the social mores and homogeny that have kind of ruled our lives. So so we don't want to maintain that. We want to transform that.
I mean, what you're saying there is one of the reasons why I tell everybody, avrilprice.com, go and have a look at the blogs that Avril writes, because they not only do avrilprice.com, because Avril's blogs not only do the tarot discussion, but they place it within a social cultural perspective, which is actually one of the reasons why I was first attracted to what you write. You're one of the few people doing both the psychic stuff with a social awareness. I thought, you know, I thought, hello, here's someone else who probably has a PhD from LSE. What's going on here? You know, like you left school with one O level, 2 O levels, you know, and it's I think a lot. You know, we've got Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop selling chaise longues for unusual sex for $3,000, claiming that it's spiritual, right? And we've got people getting sucked into the illusion that spirituality is about looking good and radiant and charismatic and magnetic and all the rest of it. Whereas in actual fact, spirituality is about the deepest and most extraordinary transformation, and it's disruptive. It's disruptive for our sense of selves, and therefore maybe disruptive for the folk around us. And it's certainly disruptive of materialism. all of which makes it easy to self-sabotage, because it means we're at risk if we get into spiritual development. Or, as I'm often having to do, is I'm having to be diplomatic in all kinds of situations about what I really think and feel, which is why I really appreciate your blogs.
You see, what I've come up against is that, that people lack vision. What they're really coming to is say, can help me create a vision of what my life might actually look like if I didn't have this problem, or if I didn't have this person to deal with. They're weighed down under, the machinations of material life. Some might call it illusory materialism, but for them it's a reality in the moment. And so my aim then is to kind of scrape away all that detritus that is kind of disabled someone from saying that, I can have that vision. What is my path here? And in order to really reach out and go for your vision, you have to make yourself vulnerable. And people are afraid of being vulnerable, because with that comes this idea of, I'm inadequate, I should be stronger, I should be more solid, or, people might see me as I'm really like I am, and, and all these different facades that are not healthy. But in actual fact, vulnerable is great, because it makes you courageous. It gives you the keys to find your own confidence. And once you kind of accept that, the step towards that vision of what you perceive your life to be, once you take that step and accept that, it's going to be fluctuating, there's going to be good things and challenging things that come, but it's about allowing spirit in at the same time to help you guide you along the way.
Okay. Good. So listen, we're coming towards the end of our hour together.
Okay.
Well, it's 27 past 8 now.
I've really enjoyed the conversation, I have to tell you.
No, it hasn't quite finished yet. So, where are you at the moment in general? What's going on for you? Is it kind of concluding?
Okay, so what am I doing? So I've just finished putting a presentation which took up lots of living, breathing moments for a symposium at the College of Psychic Studies, and it's on the hidden symbolism and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. So that's on the 18th of November. 18th, 19th and 20th of November. I'm contemplating putting a book together, but I've been wanting to do this for a very long time, actually, but I can't seem to get off the coalface. It seems to me that my place is very much in the, getting down and dirty. It's the muddy boots on the white carpet stuff, and of course I teach 3 nights a week, and I'm really enjoying it.
I'm going to phrase the question differently. In terms of your own personal development.
Oh, it's okay.
Where's your edge? What's happening? Can you say that?
Yeah, so I'm wanting to make a return into Sufism again. I love the work of Ibn Arabi and his work about unity and cutting through the illusory of the 7 stages of the development of the ego. I find that enormously helpful for when I'm wanting to contemplate on self and who I am and where I perceive my own spiritual.
So say his name more slowly so people can.
It's Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi.
We'll put that in the follow-up email. What you'll do is you'll email me his name, and then the follow-up email to everybody.
Absolutely.
We'll have that as a reference.
He's a very wise guy. He was around in the 12th century and wrote many, many books which are really contemporaneous today. I'm also kind of I'm seeking out a lot of time in nature because, you know, I've been very family orientated through lockdown. I've now got 2 grandchildren, yay, which I absolutely love. But I'm trying to get that work-life balance right, and I want to spend more time following my own pursuits. Certainly, travel is something that I'm aiming for. I used to travel a lot with my work. I mean, I was one of the first people to take tarot to the North Pole, and I'd like some more adventures like that. So that's what I'm trying to manifest.
All right.
So yeah, it's a time of contemplation, getting that work-life balance back. Certainly, you know, thinking about putting a book together and taking things to a whole new level as you know, as someone of the age I've got to in my life. Thinking about what does that mean now?
Yes. What are you going to do when you grow up? Isn't that the question we all still have?
Indeed.